So, what's the real difference between a spectacular success and a devastating failure? Is it all just about skill and hard work? Or is there some invisible force at play that we usually miss? To really get it, we need to look at the story of two friends.
All right, to understand this, we're going to have to travel back in time. We're headed to a pretty unique high school back in 1968, where the story of two brilliant friends perfectly captures that razor-thin line between incredible fortune and just awful tragedy.
So this is Lakeside School. And in 1968, this place had something that was, and I mean this, almost completely unheard of. Something most universities didn't even have yet, a computer. You know, for a teenager to get their hands on something like this back then, it was literally like winning the lottery, a true one in a million kind of opportunity.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Bill Gates, who was one of those students at Lakeside, said it himself. He gives all the credit to this incredible stroke of luck. It was the bedrock for everything he built later. No Lakeside, no Microsoft. It's really that simple.
But here's the thing, Gates wasn't the only genius in that computer room. Not by a long shot. He had a classmate, a really good friend, named Kent Evans. And they had the same talent, the same ambition. But their stories, well, they couldn't have gone in more different directions, because they landed on opposite sides of that exact same one in a million coin.
Kent Evans was, and this is according to Bill Gates himself, the best student in the class. He was right there, shoulder to shoulder with Gates, pushing the boundaries of what these new machines could do. He had all the same potential. But before he even graduated, something totally random and tragic happened. He died in a mountaineering accident.
And this right here is where it all just clicks into place. The odds of a kid going to a school like Lakeside back then, about 1 in a million. And the odds of a high school student dying on a mountain, you guessed it, also roughly 1 in a million. It was the same invisible, powerful force. For one, it was luck that created a billionaire. For the other, it was risk that ended a life.
So this story about Gates and Evans, it's not just an anecdote. It's actually a perfect window into a universal principle about how the world really works.
NYU professor Scott Galloway puts it perfectly. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Now that sounds simple, but that one little idea, it completely challenges one of the biggest stories we tell ourselves, that our success or failure is 100% our own doing.
So what are we really talking about here? Well, we use two different words, luck and risk. We call it luck when something good happens to us, and risk when something bad happens. But they're the exact same thing. They're just these powerful, random forces that are totally outside our control, and they can have a way bigger impact on how things turn out than all our best intentions.
Okay, so if this force is so powerful, how come we don't talk about it more? Well, it turns out our brains have a huge blind spot when it comes to judging why people succeed or fail. Our brains just love a simple story. He succeeded because he's a genius. She failed because she made a terrible choice. Those narratives feel so clean, so satisfying. But the idea that a huge part of it was just random chance? Ugh, that's messy, it's unsatisfying, so we kind of just ignore it. And this leads to this really funny double standard we all have. When we see someone else fail, we're quick to point to their bad decisions. It's their fault. But when we fail, oh, that's a totally different story. That was just the dark side of risk, right? Just an unlucky break that was completely out of our hands. This bias gets even trickier because it changes how we label the actions that lead to an outcome. The very same decision can be seen in two completely opposite ways. So let me ask you, what's the actual tangible difference between being inspiringly bold and being foolishly reckless? The uncomfortable truth is, the line between them is paper thin, and we only see it after we know how the story ends. The line is drawn completely in hindsight. I mean, history is just littered with examples of this. Take Cornelius Vanderbilt. The guy broke laws left and right to build his empire. But he succeeded, so we call it cunning business smarts. If he'd failed, we'd just call him a criminal. Or how about Benjamin Graham, the guy who literally wrote the book on diversification? He made his fortune on one single, massive, all-in bet. Because it worked, he's a visionary. If it hadn't, he'd be a cautionary tale. Okay, so if the world is this chaotic and random, you might be wondering, well then, what's the point? How can we learn anything? And that's a totally fair question. The answer isn't to just give up. It's about shifting our whole perspective. The first thing we've got to do is be really careful about who we study. We're obsessed with the extreme outliers, the billionaires and the spectacular flameouts. But those stories are, by definition, the ones most swayed by extreme one-in-a-million luck or risk. You can copy Bill Gates' work ethic all you want, but you can't copy his one-in-a-million lucky break of going to Lakeside.
So here are 2 practical strategies to get better at this. Number 1, just be way more careful with praise and criticism. Before you rush to judgment, just take a second and think about the invisible role that luck or risk might have played. And number 2, zoom out. Stop focusing on specific people and start looking for broad patterns. The real lessons aren't in how one guy became a billionaire, but in the common principles that help lots of people lead successful lives.
So the whole point here isn't that hard work and smart decisions don't matter. Of course they do. The crucial takeaway is that understanding luck and risk gives us a more realistic, a more humble, and frankly, a more compassionate view of how the world works. It lets us be a little kinder to people who fail and maybe a little more skeptical of our own successes.
And I'll leave you with one last question to chew on. Take an honest look at your own story, your own successes. What part of your skill might actually just be luck?